Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about Elohim. We know that through the corporeal records, Elohim has meant the gods. Elohim is plural, and that's true, but it didn't actually start out that way. And although the plurality is correct, and yet there is an explanation that when we perceive the explanation where it came from, we'll understand how come Elohim was used as the name for the gods and was plural. Well, we should first start by saying that the all-person, the ever-present Great Spirit, performs different roles, takes on different roles, does different things according to times and seasons and where he is at certain times. And this should not seem extraordinary to us if we consider that a person has many roles. He might be a father, he might be at the same time that he's also an artisan, and at the same time he's perhaps a member of a council somewhere. So he has all these different roles, and people relate to him differently depending upon the role that he's in. Well, the same with the Great Spirit. So that Elohim is indeed the Great Spirit, but in the role of everything being encompassed by him, and he is within all. So he is the totality of all, and yet separate from all. So he is essentially, we would say, the many in one, and the one in the many. And we've talked before about the placement of where these names of the Creator go, and this can be found in the Waspi, and this is actually in the third degree of Imathachava. So this is to get to this level of understanding. There's a lot of things that need to go on prior to this, but we can understand it intellectually to an extent. But when you actually go through the degrees and all that, it's a matter of experiencing in that and living in that condition spiritually. Now, that being said, I'm going to mention about Elohim. And Elohim, as the All-One, the Many in One, is located in the North Station. Now, the North is down there. Okay, it's the nadir. It's down. No one can stoop as low as the Almighty Great Spirit, the All-Person. Elohim is in that position. And so when we're in that position and going around the wheel in the North Station, we naturally look up because that's where, and when we look up, we see our older brothers and sisters. And if they happen to be angels, then we see them as people of light, or beings of light, who are more advanced, shall we say, than we are, or more toward perfection than we are. And actually what that means is that they're closer to the Great Spirit, to the Creator, to the All-Person, to Elohim. And so when we look up, we don't just see angels, but as we progress in our spiritual growth, we actually see gradations of angelic growth, of angels. And we get up as high as we can see, and essentially what we see are the gods. Now, we learned from Olaspi that the gods are perceived as flames of light, for instance. and you don't necessarily see their form. Oh, we're told in Owaspy now in this day and age, anyone, or the second resurrection, if we're being attended to by the second resurrection, that attendance is in light. You're not going to see the individual personalities there. It is as light. But when you look up and you see, and you can attain to that, and you can see the gods, well, we understand that they are not the creator. They're a person like you and I who was advanced along in their development after they've gone through the death experience, and they've kept rising and gained in the breadth and depth of their understanding, and in their wisdom, and in their power, and in their love. When we look up and we see these gods, well, we might just see a god. Now, in the past, people would see a god and say, oh, well, it must be the creator. And Jehovah allowed this in the past because the people couldn't understand a great spirit who's everywhere present. Some people couldn't. Some could, but obviously those were the faithists. But seeing this God, well, as faithists, we know that if we see a God, well, okay, it's a God. We know that the God is not the creator. So, and we're certainly not going to worship the God. Now, one of the reasons that the gods, and even the angels of the second resurrection, don't manifest to mortals as who they are, as individuals, is because mortals have a tendency to look up to our elder brothers and sisters. And we learn that from when we're very young and just out of the womb, and Mama's cradling us, and we look up and see her face and a smiling face, and we're all delight. And same with Dad, Papa comes in, and the brothers and sisters and neighbors and relatives. And so we extend our love outward and all that, but they all look, they're all much more advanced than we are when we're very young. We understand that. Well, even now growing up, we have this tendency then to look up and sort of, emulate. Yes, we want to emulate them, but we sort of look to them for guidance and, which way to proceed and all that. Whereas what Jehovah's kingdom wants is for man to look to Jehovah, not to them, to Jehovah. You see, rather than calling on the gods or the angels, you call on Jehovah. Well, but for those who look upon someone and they go, yes, well, I want to emulate that. Well, that's good. But the thing is that we realize that the only perfect person is the all person, and everyone else makes mistakes. It says everyone else does goy. That's what we're told in Owaspy. Now, goy is the guy line. Like you have a tent, and to keep the tent from falling over, you put guy lines up there and it holds it. Well, a guy line has a slant, so we could call it the hypotenuse if you want, if you will. And so when we see a person who's higher than what we are, we're actually seeing the end result, but there's a way of looking where you can see his goy, his or her goy. And we can understand that the darker they are, the closer they are down to the earth, the rise isn't quite so high, and they're not up so far up in the light. And so we as we move closer to Jehovah, we move closer and closer to the vertical, to the upright. Now, when we're looking up at gods, to us mortals here, they all just look upright to us. They straight up, and we can't tell the difference between them because they all just, we're not progressed enough to be able to determine differences in grade in that level. But amongst themselves, they understand, they can see these differences. And they know that the Great Spirit is the central shaft. He is, and this is what it says in Owaspy 2, I am the central shaft, all else do goy. So as we try to reach that center, as the gods do, well, we look up and we see what's called the pleroma of gods. The pleroma of gods, they're all as one. They're as one, and you can't tell the difference between them and Elohim, because they're basically so close to Elohim that we can't tell the difference, except we know the difference because they're in form. So we look up to them and we see that they have a form, and because they have this form, we know that they're not the Creator. But in the past, they didn't know that. And so false gods would come along and say, well, I'm the Creator. And people would believe them if they didn't have the faith, if they weren't faithless. If they didn't have their inner light developed sufficiently to perceive the truth of the matter. And this is one of the reasons why, for instance, that at the time of Moses, that the hangers-on were not eligible for the rights of Elohim, because the Elohim talked about the rights of Elohim, acknowledged this and understood this. But you can't give that to somebody who doesn't understand it, because then they're going to worship the God rather than the Great Spirit, Elohim. We're told in Oahspe that there was a time in the past before this when man understood that the gods were not the Creator, that they were just like we mortals, only high raised up, and they were enlightened, they were spirits and all that. But this thing with the false gods happened after that. And so Elohim, because of the pleroma of gods, because of the group of gods up there, well, the false gods sort of, well, you have the, you have a god in this holy council, but you have the false gods. Now they would sometimes confederate together and all that, and they could form a sort of a group together. And so when you have a pantheon of gods, in a sense that's like the pleroma for except for it's oriented towards self, but there's also an orientation toward higher standards from what the mortals had that were being attracted by these false gods. And so Jehovah would use these false gods ultimately to lift these, to force these mortals, worshippers up, to do the God's bidding. So the word Elohim, in a sense, does mean the pleroma of gods, but Elohim is much more than that. He is the pleroma of gods, and yet he's everyone. He's you and me and everyone else as well. And yet he's also the totality of the whole, as well as being in everything. So that was our little talk today on Elohim, and may the blessings of the Great Spirit go with you.